We're going to do a introductory GIS workshop for the DIY Cartography class. So, hello everyone, I'm Brendan. I guess a few of you know me already. And to start this intro workshop, we're going to talk a little bit about making maps before we actually dive into it. And then we will download some data. Not necessarily the data you'll be working with in this class. There's some already collected for that. What I want to take you through is the process of finding your own, downloading it, understanding what it is and what it means to you, and then to make a couple really simple maps, lay them out how you'd like them, and export them in several different ways as raster image files just to print immediately, or as vector files to put into your own workflow in, say, CAD or Illustrator. So let's get started. The first thing to know about maps, and we're talking about, today I'm going to talk about scientifically making maps. We're not about aesthetics, which is super important, or telling your story, but a little bit about the science behind it. So the first thing to remember is that the world is not flat like a map. It's 3D. And we usually think of it as a sphere. Really, it's an ellipsoid. But really, it's actually more complicated than that. This is the geoid, which is a gravitational representation of the Earth minus the oceans, minus all the water. The first thing you can see is that it is nowhere near a nice sphere. It's got big indentations in it. It's sort of squished a little bit squished horizontally. It's got these very odd things to it. So if we use a mathematical representation of the planet as an ellipsoid, it's nowhere near what the planet really looks like. So in the past, they used very simple datums for the Earth, like a sphere. Then they got more complicated with an ellipsoid, defined nicely with equations. And now it's a combination of measurements on the Earth's surface and from remote sensing, and describing those as very complex mathematical models that we can use as datums for mapping the Earth. And then, so if you think about a globe and you want to turn it into a two-dimensional map, what you're going to do is project your map on, you're going to project your globe onto a two-dimensional surface. So this is going to cause all sorts of distortions. So for centuries, they've been thinking of all these different ways of essentially unfolding your three-dimensional map into 2D. So you've got ones that are just putting it onto a sphere. What you very commonly see, like with web maps, the most common one is Web Mercator. That's what you see with Google Maps. And it gets, we'll see if it's, so you've got ones that are preserving the poles, for example. So there's the Mercator projection, and what you can see if you look carefully is that it's much smaller here and vertically, and then it gets wider, and then along the equator it's smaller again. So you get these very large distortions in space. So we usually think of North America from looking at Web Mercator maps as quite big, but this is because of the distortion there. And we're thinking of Central America as quite a bit smaller than it actually is. So you can get some very strange projections that won't look at all recognizable. This one was a very popular one for representing the world as a single map. Now there's a bunch that are much more accurate, that are essentially taking a knife along the globe and unwrapping it, like the good homocine, sorry. And that preserves a lot more accuracy, but it's extremely hard to read. Some of these are very useful for looking at the Arctic poles, for example. So they do have their uses, except, well, some of them don't really have uses. Yeah. Look at this one, and they get even weirder. So a fun way to think about maps, if you go on your browser to xkcd.com/977, it's what maps say about you. So, for example, Mercator, you're not really into maps. Well, this one is Buckminster Fuller's, so some of you architects may like it, although I don't know if it really tells you much about the world. So a very common thing to talk about in cartography is if you see the Gall-Peters and the Hobo-Dyer, cultural imperialism. So this is trying to make good what we see in a lot of maps like Mercator and Web Mercator is that North America and Europe are quite large. And so there's maps that are trying to correct that by making Europe and North America quite small and like giving Africa and South America a lot more size to reverse cultural imperialism and teach great values. However, they're not any more accurate. So, just fun things to think about maps and to understand it at a scale we're not going to look at. Almost all of the maps you're going to see, or most of the data you're going to get, is coming in a map projection that's in the state plane system. So this is a very nice way of solving the problem if you're only working in a single state in the US. So the coordinate systems, the state plane coordinate systems are done by each state, and they're in a simple Cartesian system, so you don't have to worry about mapping the world on the ellipsoid and having latitude and longitude. You're just thinking about things in terms of Cartesian x, y, and feet or meters. And so they're great for surveyed maps and all that, and CAD drawings and all that sort of stuff. And thankfully, most of the data we're going to look at is already in either North Carolina state plane feet or meters. Okay, so let's get on to actually getting some data so we know what this means to us. So the quickest way to get some good data for Raleigh or Wake County is probably just to go to the Wake GIS data site. So for example, if I just type in Wake County GIS, let's say data download, you'll find the download data thing. Now, there's a lot of stuff here that we might not actually be interested in. Well, okay. So almost everything on this page, if you skip the, so most of the things here are vector data. So the shape files are ArcGIS's format of vector data. Now layers are typically representations of data. This is a little more complicated though, because some of them up there are an orthoimagery format. We're going to avoid that. So just forget about the layer section up at the top there, and for the Wake County GIS site, we're just going to dive into the shape files. The other stuff can be found more easily and usefully other places. Okay, so really simple. It's just zip files. You just right-click and download the one you want, or left-click. So let's say we want the Wake census data for 2010. I'll download that. I'll download the Wake streets. Any of this is useful, like say the railroads. Open space. So this will all be the latest data that they have, usually for 2015. They update most of it. Then there's City of Raleigh down below, which will have buildings that include the building height, which is really useful, fairly rare. However, you'll see at the bottom that there's archived historic data. There's not very much put up on the website. Like, for example, the old roads, the old buildings aren't there. But if you are interested in it, you can contact the city GIS manager and get it. But their data is only going to go back not terribly far, maybe 2010 or something.
Even the old?
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at what we've downloaded now. Did everyone download a couple shape files to look at?
If you raise your hand, I'll come if you need.
So I'll just go ahead and extract Raleigh buildings. And I'll extract it to a folder, which would be much better. Okay, so if you look inside of the extracted folder, shape files come with a whole bunch of other information. So the one we're interested in is the shape file itself. The other things are associated data types. We don't have all of the extensions turned on. The PRJ is the projection file. That simply says where it is in space, what the projection system is. North Carolina state plane feet in this case. Let's see. So if you look inside of it, it's telling you that the datum is North American datum of 1983 and the projection state plane North Carolina in feet. So the projection file you may see come with a lot of data, including, for example, some raster files. And there's databases with these as well. the DBF up top. And we'll explore that inside of ArcGIS. You could also open up the DBF in, say, Microsoft Access or OpenOffice. So the simplest way is probably just to drag and drop the shapefile in to ArcMap. So in the Start menu, I guess, if you haven't already, just type in Arc, and you'll see ArcMap, ArcScene, ArcCatalog. ArcMap is the GIS we'll use in this class. It's made by ESRI, Environmental Systems Research Institute. And it's a proprietary GIS, costs quite a bundle, but it's widely used in design and engineering and planning. There are free open source alternatives like QGIS and GrassGIS that I do recommend. But ArcScene is for 3D GIS, and ArcCatalog is a nice way of organizing your data, but it's too complicated to get into right now. It just confuse you. So go ahead and open up ArcMap, and we'll start exploring the data inside of it. So when you're in ArcMap, you can go to the Add Data button right here. And then you'll browse to your Downloads folder where you put it. So they, strangely, they make this rather complicated. So to find where you want to browse to, you only have in the drop-down menu, there's only a couple defaults. So you either need to browse up and find it. So you can use the up one level. I'm going to go to Downloads. And select the buildings and the shape file. So when I go to the Add Data, you'll see that all of those other files here are ignored, and it's just picking out the shape file, the one that it considers as data. The others are just associated supporting files, essentially, so you don't need to worry about them.
I don't have downloads.
So just go.
I did that. I'm all the way back. I can't go any further.
I am too.
Just this home documents.
Try the Connect to folder over here, and go to your user folder. Do you see?
Hang on.
Which one was connected folder?
It's this one with a little plus on it.
So similar use.
And then browse to your username, and under that there'll be downloads. So for example, select the downloads folder under Connect to folder and hit OK. That will open it there.
When we're navigating to the folder where we have downloaded, it's not, the shape files aren't showing up.
Oh, they're still zipped in that case. Did you extract?
Yeah.
Let me see.
So here they are.
Unzipped, but they're not.
I'm sorry, I actually put
They're
them
not
on.
showing up the same as fields.
So they're in there.
And
Right
here,
here. There they are.
I went down.
Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
That should be
It's the one that shows up.
But when I do it here,
So all of these,
what
what he's saying is the only one that's going to show up is the actual shape file.
Okay.
Because these are data files.
Okay.
Those files.
Okay, it's down here.
Oh,
that's
good.
good.
So if you put a bunch of, that's just to connect to the folder.
Okay.
So if you just connect to your
Okay.
Oh, okay, the shape files is there.
So the only thing that I'm at is the SHP dot. Right.
And it'll link to other information.
Gotcha, okay.
All right. I'm sorry that this stuff is so complicated. I don't know why they made it so much trouble. But anyways, you want to point this towards your data folder first of all. So to do that, hit Connect to Folder, browse to it. So under your username, I put mine in downloads. So I'm just going to connect to downloads. Now in the add data dialog, you find the folder where you put the data and select a shapefile, for example, and open it. You should just be able to drag and drop straight in, so you can ignore all this if you want. It's a much easier way to manage it.
You guys are really familiar with InDesign, which sort of links files. ArcMap kind of works the same way. So if you make a map project and you move all these shapefile folders elsewhere, then it won't know where they are. So that's why keeping them in one place and then linking it to that drive is important.
At the end of class, I'll talk about a better way of organizing your files, which I highly suggest you do. But we're gonna make some maps first and care about the data before that. Otherwise, I get into that column. What's the point?
Can you help Jessica over here figure out what it is? It's in her downloads, but somehow.
So let's see the data. Here's downloads.
And that's where it says stream stations. Yeah, it's like right there.
Looks good.
Yeah.
Did you extract all those or
Now
not?
they extract their
Connect to there. Now I've got all the shape files.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Does anyone else have a problem yet?
Did you try the other one too?
No.
Oh, you've not extracted it yet.
Oh,
That's why it
okay.
still zip.
So I'm going to go ahead and add the buildings and the Wake streets, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm going to add the streets as well. So the first thing to point out is the table of contents, your layer manager on the left. So just like in AutoCAD or Photoshop or Illustrator, they are organized by layers. So what's on top displays on top. So right now, I've got the roads on top of the buildings, which isn't a problem, but I'm going to put them underneath. And the checkbox, unsurprisingly, hides or shows the layer. No mysteries there. Now, if you want to change how the layers look, or find out anything about them, you can right-click on it and go to properties, for example, will allow you to change how they look. But before we do that, let's go to open attribute table. So this is going to open that DBF file you saw in the folder along with the data. So this is a database that's attached to the vector shapefile format, and it describes all these buildings here. So there's a single entry for each building, and so the FID is the ID for each building, and then each of the columns on the top is different categories. So, for example, the FTR code corresponds to a description type. We've got canopy, commercial, residential, and so on and so forth. So we can see all of this in the table. If you right-click on say FTR code, you can sort them, for example, in the opposite order.
What is that?
It's just the code, let's say. So it corresponds to the description, so it gives you a numeric.
FTR stands for what?
I don't know. You have to look it up.
Okay.
And they'll have a description in the metadata of what these mean in more detail. That should be, is this the buildings? Well, for example, for the streets, I think it should be in the well, there's metadata right there. There you go. So you can read that, and it'll tell you everything about them. So if you select a single entry, I'm going to select this one, and if you click on the far left of the column, you can highlight it, and then on the far left you can click zoom to, and you'll find that specific the polygon. So the database can link to specific spatial objects, and vice versa. So if I select something, with the selection tool right here in ArcMap, it'll also highlight those fields in the database. And you can shift select to highlight multiple. Now, and clear features is right over here. You don't particularly need to know this right now. I just wanted to let you know that there is a database behind that, and we'll use that to change the symbology, to change the representation on these buildings. So if you right click on the buildings layer and go to properties, we've got a bunch of fields here. Source will tell you a little bit about the data. You can see the projection and the projected coordinate system. So you can check that your data is actually in feet, for example. What we're interested in, first of all, is the symbology. This is how you represent the data. So as you can see right now, the symbol is this not particularly handsome teal color. So we could go ahead and change it. We can make it hollow, hit apply to apply it, or pick a color. It's not very easy to change the settings on these, I'm afraid. The simple ones right here, like the outline width, plenty easy to change. But if you go into edit symbol, and you want to make a more complex pattern, it's going to be a fair bit of trouble. I'd advise you to do it in Illustrator. So you can make a fairly ugly map and not worry about it. Just change it in Illustrator, in which case you might want to make things very easy to select. So unfortunately, exports tend to get flattened, or the layers all jumbled together. They're not very well preserved. So I suggest you probably make things clearly different colors, like a bright red for a building type. Then you'll be able to select by color later on if you didn't make anything else red, for example. There's a bunch of pre-made styles if you want to pick some things, but these will make editing in Illustrator much harder if you pick something with a hatch pattern on it, for example.
Yeah, they don't come in as a hatch pattern. They all come in as little individual teeny tiny pieces of lines.
Yeah, so that could be a disaster. So now if we want to symbolize these by building types, we're on the default features single symbol. We're going to go on this left menu to categories. You'll see value field. And here's that FTR code we talked about before. So if you want to see all the FTR codes, you go to add all values at the bottom here. And this puts our 7 different FTR code types. However, we don't know what those mean unless you refer to the metadata. So I'm just going to go to description instead, which is a little more straightforward. So you could take some time and give these nice colors. I'm not going to bother right now. But let's talk about a few things while we're here. Let's say you don't care about greenhouses or mobile homes. You're going to call those all residential. You can, say, shift select those and go to group values, and it'll merge it into a single one. If the name's too confusing, you can go to, well, that's just for the legend.
So just by going through what you just did, you're assigning different colors to the different descriptions?
That's right,
Okay.
yes.
So whereas originally they were all a single color,
All
just
single.
by going through this and adding the different descriptions, you're designating them as different colors.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll apply it and we can see the difference.
Okay.
So these guys are all residential or maybe greenhouses now, or mobile homes. We got the blue for commercial. So this will be very useful with buildings, with roads, with vector files for water, with census data. You can start to symbolize them this way. Now let's look at the roads. I'll hide the buildings. So the same thing is true for the streets. One detail right now. I have Wake streets and Raleigh roads. The Wake streets are polylines, like splines. Well, yeah, and lines. The Raleigh roads, however, are polygons. So they're showing you the width. There are some issues like they don't have some of the intersections on them. And you can't use them for things like vector topology, like doing a network analysis on them, but you're not going to do that anyway, so they might be useful for you. So you'll want to explore what their attribute table looks like and the sort of data they have, but we'll look at the streets for right now. I'm going to go to the attribute table. I'll right-click on the Wake Streets layer and go to Open Attribute Table. And you can see the street names. So now that you have this, you could, for example, search for a given street. Or what? They have all sorts of interesting things like the speed limit, if they're one-way streets. There's tons of interesting stuff here, but what we're interested in is the type of road. So we could go to S-type here, street type. And we've got roads, boulevards, lanes, drives. Might be more useful to go to the Carto level, which I suppose is cartographic level. I'm going to right-click and assort ascending. So it's got, for example, major and highway. Anyways, that's just what's inside the table. I'm going to go to the symbology. So I'll right-click on Wake Streets, go to Properties, Symbology. It's on single feature right now. I'm going to go to Categories, and I'll pick a useful one now. Oh, class name might be good. Add all values. There we go. That looks useful. So if you're going to make a nice map of the streets, you probably want to use a lot of these, give them different weights, different colors or tones. But that's too much trouble for right now. So I'm just going to show you how to do it really quickly, I'll just do 2 of them. I'm going to group all these values so that I have the highways separate. I'll, just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to pick the default highway one, and the other one I'll assign the residential street, let's say. So that's got a very small width versus the highway. I'll go and make it 1. So if I apply, you can see the highway symbolized versus the roads. Now, there's something called symbol levels, which will make things the scale of weights scale as you zoom out, and the and things disappear once you go past a certain point. But since you're only working at 3 map scales, I don't think that's worth it. I think you can just at each one set the line weights that you want. You'll probably be changing them in Illustrator anyway, so I don't think you should worry with that. Let's go and put the census data in here next, and I'll show you something a little different you can do with polygons that have values to them. Suppose we could do it with building height, actually, but we'll go ahead and find the census data. I downloaded Wake Census. I'll extract it. And I'll add the census data. I'll add the Wake blocks, block groups. Let's say block group. Okay. So once you add the block group, you can right-click and go to Properties. You should probably explore the attribute table and look at the metadata when you're really interested in it. So this time, instead of going to when I'm under symbology, instead of going to categories, I'm going to go to quantities, or you could do both quantities and charts will be interesting in this case. I'll go to charts first of all, and I'll pick bar column, and I'll pick, let's say, total population, and add that. Then I'll pick, vacant as well, and occupied. Oh, let's just do one first to keep it simple. I'll pick a total population, and I'll make the symbol, I don't know, let's say blue, and apply. So now it's putting a little bar chart to show the population of each of the census blocks. So like this one obviously has more population than this one, and you can see it quickly on the map.
What are the black lines? Are they connected to the center?
Yeah, so this is showing it, connecting it to the centroid if it's been moved off of it. That's probably for so they don't overlap when you're zoomed out. So we can add more things to the bar chart, and it might, if there's something interesting to add it. Okay, so other options for this that might make more sense in some cases are to use graduated colors. So for example, if I pick for the field total population, pick a color ramp, and apply it, now my heavily populated one is going to be this darker color, like this orange here. The lighter populated one's the light yellow. So you can see this act much faster than the bar chart, for example. But the bar chart allows you, if you symbolize this with population, the bar chart would allow you to show another layer of data, let's say the vacant lots, for example. And you can explore the other representations. We got graduated symbols, dot density, and all sorts of things.
So with the graduated colors, you can only look at one value.
Mm-hmm.
You can't compare. So like dot density, you could have multiple values, but in a graduated, you can just have a single value.
That's right, yeah.
So that would be a difference for why you choose one.
Mm-hmm. So while we're here on the graduated colors and looking at, let's say, classified color ramps, you'll see over here classification and the type, natural breaks, janks, and classes. So with the drop-down, we can change the number of classes to, say, 10 classes, which will give us a lot more gradation of tone. And you'll be able to see a little more. If I only make it, say, 2 classes, it doesn't tell you. This is a useful way if you only want to know, say, if there's more than 2,700 people in a place. The other one will tell you more gradation of information. So if you see the classify button over here, you can use that to pick a different scheme for where the breaks go, what values are assigned to what color. So natural breaks is a good way of finding a nice balance for big spreads of data and places where there's a lot of values clustered in a small area and a few values clustered spread over a long area. If we did equal interval, for example, from this drop-down method, this is often a really useful way to do it, but you may have all of these categories that you basically don't see anything on the map. And you will barely see these colors show up. Whereas this one will cover a large portion of the map and you won't see. So you may need to add more classes to see much difference in space. Quantile is a clustering that puts a lot more classes in the clustered values. So you can explore that if you like. If you set it to manual, you may want to set it to, for example, first to equal interval to get that spread, and then to manual, and then you can change the values yourself if there's something specifically you want. You'll need to set the number of classes before you go to manual. You can also exclude values beneath something with the exclusion button. I don't want to get too much into this, but it could help you, so I want you to be aware that it's there. Before looking at exporting maps, let's find a few different sorts of data to add to this. So if we want ortho imagery, there's a lot of ways to get it, but the way I suggest is that you get, the USGS has web mapping services that allow you to either stream or download data in a bunch of different formats. So right here I've got the USGS Aeros orthoimagery 1 foot. So very high, very detailed orthoimagery. So if you want to find it, I would type in on your web browser USGS Aeros orthoimagery, and it's this fourth link you probably want, the raster.nationalmap.gov. And I'm going to pick this last choice, View in ArcMap, and it's going to download a layer file that will link. So the layer files are just representations of data. They don't actually hold data, which is a problem you'll find a lot. Often when you make a map, sorry, I'm going to go on a small tangent here. When you make a map and you've put this symbology on it, for example, for the census data, you can save that by right-clicking on the block group and go save as layer file. This will save just the representation of the data, not the actual data itself. So if you just share layer files with someone, they won't be able to see anything because there will be no data to point at. If you share just the data itself, they won't be able to see this symbolization. You can give them the map file and the data, or the layer files and the data, and they'll see something similar. This web mapping service we're downloading is a different matter. The layer file points to the streaming imagery service. So I've downloaded it now. It's in my downloads folder, and I'll go ahead and add it. So there's my orthoimagery. Now, this is going to bring up an error that we can ignore for now. It's saying that it's in a geographic coordinate system and not in North Carolina state plane. This is because it's an imagery service for the whole US. And it's not in any state plane system, so it has to be, to cover the whole US, it has to be in a geographic coordinate system. So ArcMap's going to just reproject this on the fly. This is computationally slower, and it can cause some distortions in the data if you're going to actually compute anything on it, which we're not. So it's fine. If you're actually going to do any processing, you need to reproject it. So there's our web map of orthoimagery. And I'll zoom in to someone's house. And you can see how nice the resolution is. Because it's a web map service, it's a little slow. Also, it's being reprojected on the fly, so it's a little slow. So one thing to note at this point, perhaps, is, we'll leave it till later. So you can put the building layer on top. If you turn the building layer on top, you can start to see how good the buildings are or not. One thing that will happen with orthophotos is that they will actually be shifted a little bit. So if you're, say, digitizing CAD from an orthophoto, it won't be perfectly accurate because, well, yeah, it's basically, well, yeah.
Two different systems.
Yeah. But there's also obviously inaccuracies in the surveyed building data. And they've got some small buildings and not some others, but missing quite a bit of its roof, for example. So you can
The guy
already.
did an addition and he didn't get a permit.
So by comparing two different data types, you can start to explore your data and do some check the quality of it, in a sense. We'll look at two more data sources that will be useful to you. The national map. So in your web browser, you can type in national map viewer, or you can just try and directly put in viewer.nationalmap.gov/basic. So this is a collection of a lot of the USGS's data, especially the elevation data. So has anyone not found it?
Not exactly.
You're on that.
Alright.
So you could type in the address on search location, or you can just zoom in with the scroll bar on the map to Raleigh. Maybe I should have typed it in. So I'll just zoom in about, let's say, this far. You got a couple options here. Up at the top, there's current extent. That means it's going to look for data that's on the extent of the map right here. That's nice. You could also, say, choose the box option and draw a selection window and ask for data inside of this area. So the first thing we'll look for is, we'll be looking under elevation products. Elevation source data, the next one, is things like LiDAR, the sort of raw data that the raster elevation maps are made from. So we'll start with elevation products. So what we have available is, there's 1 meter DEMs for some places, not for Raleigh. We have still fairly good resolution data, 1/9 arc second. So that's a, let's say, geographic unit of measure, like a fraction of a lat long. I think 1/9 arc second is something like 3.4 meters, let's say. So it's pretty good resolution. And if you want to know what that is in feet, you'll have to, I don't know, like 10 feet maybe? The national map has, for almost all of the contiguous United States, it has 1/3 arc second data. And for a lot of areas like North Carolina, there's 1/9 arc second data for most of it. So we can select that one and then hit Find Products. And now it's all the ones that are available for Raleigh are here. So if you click on, if you look over here on the left on USGS NED, National Elevation Data Set, there's the footprint. That'll draw this blue line showing that it covers our extent. I'll zoom out a little bit, and you can see that these NED tiles are very large. So it covers a fair chunk of Wake County. So if you want to get the whole county, it won't take too many footprints to get too many NED tiles. There's the other tile it's looking at is the one, my bounding box went just over the line of the first one, so it's showing that one in case I wanted as well. So to download it, you can either add it to your cart and select a bunch of them, or you can just go ahead and hit download. We'll download it as a zip file. Again, this will be in a, I think this will be in a geographic coordinate system, but that's not a problem for us right now. If you want to compute contours from it, you would need to reproject it to North Carolina State Plane. Now, there's some other things that could be very interesting for you guys here on the national map viewer. I'm going to return to search, and actually quite a few of these things could be interesting, but we're going to look up at historic topo maps. This won't be quite so easy to do. Because there's all these different data extents, and we don't know which ones through history will have anything for Raleigh. It would be nice if they gave us all of them. So if I hit the 30 by 60 minute and find products, there's a bunch of them back from 1990 and 1984 historic maps. So if I click on the thumbnail, not very. And you can search some of the others. Looks like there's not. But you should look through these. You'll find a bunch of historic ones. Like, for example, we've got 1950 here, 1943 maps of the Raleigh area. So it's a decent source of historic data. And the USGS maps have quite a bit of information. They may have contours, buildings, roads, and good stuff on them. So you can go ahead and download any of, you can download those if they interest you.
So those would be layers too?
Those will actually be PDFs or GeoPDFs, which are just PDFs that have a projection file with them.
Okay.
So if you pick the GeoPDF, you should be able to bring that. It will have a projection, so you should be able to bring it into ArcMap nicely. If you pick the normal PDF, it won't know where it is in space, and you're going to have to map it yourself, which is what we'll look at in the next workshop. So if you can get a GeoPDF, your life will be a hell of a lot easier. Which is why I'm suggesting take a look here. These have been digitized from print maps, so they're getting fairly far back in history. Ever since the USGS started getting serious about maps. Another source for data from the USGS, even though they've been trying to standardize and centralize it all, there's still a bunch of different places to look. So earthexplorer.usgs.gov, this is more remote sensing imagery, so satellites, especially some things like the shuttle radar topography mission. Some of these are global data sets too. But what we're going to look at is old aerial photography. So for address, I'm just going to type in Raleigh, NC. And it's got Raleigh here, so I'll click on it. It puts a marker there. I guess I could zoom to it. Then date range. So I'll put this as 01, let's say 1920 to 01, say 20, just say 2000. And then that's under search criteria. Before I search, I'm going to go to data sets, the second tab up top, and pick what I want to look for. So there's all sorts of stuff here, but I think aerial is probably the only thing that'll interest you. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and pick aerial photo mosaics, aerial photo single frames. I doubt there'll be anything from aircraft scanners. This other stuff will only be available in recent years if you like the high resolution ortho imagery and the NAPE, which is the National Agricultural Imagery Program. See, it says 2003 to present, and the high resolution imagery is 2000 to present. So that will help you if you want to look at a time series over the last 10 years of ortho imagery. If you just want the most recent ortho imagery, the USGS Aeros service is a much easier way to get it. If you want really historic ones, I suggest you search through these first two. And they go back to 1937 and, well, okay, so once you select those, it's time to search. So I'll hit results. So the first thing to see here is there's that drop down, aerial photo mosaics. It only searches that one. It doesn't search the photo frames until you select it and do a search again. So there's two mosaics, which are collections of photos. So you can click on the footprint to see the area it covers, a big chunk. And then you can click on the, you can overlay it by clicking on Browse Overlay. And it's showing you a mosaic of, I don't know, maybe 50, 100 aerial photographs. And then there's the download options over here to download those. I'm going to switch to single frames. And we've got a bunch of photos over time from the 80s, I think down to the 40s even. There's several pages of it, 4 pages of these single frame photos over our time period. It looks like it's going back to the 1950s. And you can hit the footprints to see where the extent they cover. So this could be a nice source of a different sort of historic data as well. So that's all about data sources I wanted to talk about. We can get back to actually making a map. Are you all up to speed? Is any
So
any
you have to
questions?
log in to download. So what? How do,
You just make up a login, you make up a new one.
oh, so anybody? Okay.
You just have to make one up.
Okay.
You can't ever read the things that, if you're a human, you can read.
And 7, 8.
Anyone got questions?
Everybody good?
Shall we take a short break or
Well,
Okay.
I have classes.
Oh, I'm sorry, did you say if you wanted to
Oh.
download these, you just hit that download button and then...
Yeah, you may need to make for Earth Explorer. You may need to make a login.
You have to do it.
Oh,
Yeah.
Let's take a quick 5-minute break,
Yeah,
and
let's
we'll still finish by, let's say, 7:15 at the latest. There's just a little bit more to do.
Okay.
Thanks, Brianna. Awesome.
So do we have the Earth Explorer on there too, Sarah?
I just added it, but you're in one thing I can't edit because you're in one thing.
Okay, I'm gonna add that.
I added it in the syllabus because I can't get in the other thing.
Yeah.
So you copy them from the syllabus.
So I'm just gonna do separate categories that are the ones from tonight. It seems like just on top, so some are redundant.
That's what I thought. Okay. I'm gonna go get my dinner and come back.
Text.
Yeah, and I thought it was in fields or display, and I thought it was in buildings.
So this
Yeah, and then
This is labels.
Also like an aerial.
Yeah, so
if you
instructions, there's
label it and you apply. Yeah.
they keep popping up and on. Maybe I just, that was,
interviewing, and it's,
okay, labels as well.
Here?
after.
It could be useful, but not
Not
this
really.
extent.
I'm not sure how many turns on, but I did. Thank you.
I should have maybe mentioned it. There's too many things to
I
mention.
know.
I just say,
Already
again, we'll-
busy, so- Thank you.
Review it on our class.
Oh, I see, okay.
And it will download a language file,
Yeah.
which will link to
That's good, yeah.
streaming
Oh, right, that's
cloud, a cloud of data.
There's all sorts of other great sources, like the library website that have
Yeah.
additional
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
And the
We found it at the historic registry. They had an awesome set of stuff of all the buildings that once were and all the buildings that are. That was a nice one, because otherwise you're like reading about this property that was on so-and-so street and you're trying to figure out, now, where was that? And so it's great that they've already pre-plotted them and
Oh,
they make
yeah.
that accessible.
Sarah, do you know Carl Larson from the State Archive? Oh my gosh, I should bring him with me. Love it.
You should. You should go to one of these.
He's been living in downtown Raleigh since like I'd say early 60s. But he is the well source. I mean, he first was one of those friends, and he was a photograph from like 1916. Like, oh yeah, that's something east on Dawson Street, just past this house, whatever. I mean, completely a middle track of information. And he recommended a book that I actually found randomly. It's the 1970 story during the national aspects of architecture. And so I found a copy randomly at Reader's Corner, and then he showed me his copy. And he's like edited the whole thing with like sticky notes and like, yeah, like you said, oh yeah, you should look at my edited copy. Just like, it's absolutely insane.
You got all the things.
Did you read all those? Did you read all those books you had? Christmas reading?
We've read a couple of them.
The big Robert Tomes.
I've read about 200 pages of them. Out of the like 800 that are there.
Monday or Tuesday?
The smaller ones are like more at first, but yeah.
Monday is the little room for the.
Is that all of us?
What time is it? Give it a script on
How did my group run? I didn't even look.
Let's dive back in and finish this show up. So we want to make a map, so let's get back into ArcMap. And just like CAD has a layout view, ArcMap has a layout view. It's right down here. So we're in Data View, which is this one. Right next to it is Map View, Layout View. I might want to, while we're in Data View, when you're zooming, this is the same in the Layout View. When you're zooming, you'll see up top there's this map scale right next to your Add Data button. Right now it's at 1 to 12,500, and as I zoom, it's out. It'll get a 1,000, 1 to 10,000, for example. I can type in a value 1 to 100,000. And it'll zoom to that scale. So there's a preset list, and you can add your own values. So if you want to get to, when you make a map, you really want to make a nice map scale so that you can use it for scaled drawings and measure distances on it when it's printed. Okay, so I'm going to go to the layout view, and now we're on paper space. We still have the map scale, and you'll also see up there, there's a percentage. That's the size of the paper space on the screen. So, like in other programs you're familiar with, you want to change the paper size. You're going to change the print settings, the page and print settings. So go to File, Page and Print Setup, and you know what printer you want to use. You could change the paper settings, but we can go and unclick Use Printer Paper Settings and use the map page size, since we're doing it digitally anyways. And you can say set a custom width. So we want 29? Width 34. And the height 34?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So you can set your height. I guess we want a portrait. And I'll hit OK. So again, like AutoCAD layout, you can drag these drag the I think it's called the data frame in this case. You can also use create guides using the rulers up top. So if you just click on the ruler, it'll create a guide, and you can slide it along. Set it, say, to make a 1-inch margin. It'll snap to the data frame will snap to the guides nicely. You could also snap it. You could also put the guides on the edge of the paper, snap it to the paper itself, which in many cases may be better, especially if you're putting this into Illustrator. Set your margins later. Okay. So now we want to find a nice map scale up top. So when you're here, when you zoom, you'll be zooming to paper space, which shouldn't be surprising. And you've got the, on the paper space, you've got the pan paper space. Your regular pan is where it lived before over here. If you want to, I'll get the select elements cursor, so you can double click on the data frame here, or single click to select it. If you double click, you'll be in the data mode inside of it, and you can zoom in there, or
Reposition.
yeah, reposition, pan around, using the regular pan tool over here. So I can, however, select the map scale right here. Let's say 1 to 5,000. Okay, so let's say I'm happy with this, and I'm ready to export it. I'll just go to File, Export Map. And I'll put in my downloads. I'll call it Raleigh. And the save file type, we've got a bunch of choices. So JPEG, PNG would be good ones for you guys. PDF or AI for putting it into Illustrator. So you can't send the this map mode straight out to CAD. You can send the vector data itself to CAD, and we'll look at that in a minute. It'll be the whole thing, and it won't have any of this layout you've done. So if I pick, let's say, PNG, you can set the resolution. For making nice print maps, you obviously want to set high resolution. If it's just digital maps, you don't necessarily need it. Tanya would be much better at telling you the right resolution for your maps, for the print maps, so we'll leave that.
Yeah, I mean, we should export them at, I mean, for these plotters, 150 or 200 is actually fine.
Okay. And the color mode, you can, with PNG, you can set transparent backgrounds, which may be useful. Although going into Illustrator, all this doesn't really matter. Oh, well, I mean, the nice thing about the raster modes here, the PNG and JPEG, is you can just make a map straight away that you can use. And if you're working just with the old orthos and stuff, and you're not adding more map elements to them, this could be a good place to get them right out. So the resolution for the Illustrator will just be for the raster layers. We don't have any right now except for the ortho imagery. So that'll be setting the resolution for the ortho imagery. So you probably would want to set vectorized layers with bitmap markers and fills, and pick your color space. So that's all there is to that. Oh, something I definitely should have mentioned. Well, first, so if you pick a vector layer, let's say the buildings, and you right-click on it, you'll see data. And there is export data and export to CAD. If you pick export to CAD, you can send it either to DWG or DXF. I just do one at a time, say buildings, pick your DWG year and pick the output file name and location. And that's all there is to it. It might not come out very nicely, but
How did you export it?
Right click on the layer.
right click on the layer and
Okay.
there's data export to CAD. So for sending it to CAD, you'll need to do it layer by layer, essentially. And it'll only work for the vector layers. On that note, bringing CAD data here is something you very well may want to do. It's plenty easy, but the one thing you want to do is in AutoCAD set the coordinate system first. You can do that now. When I started, you couldn't. Pick a good one. In this case, North Carolina State Plane feet. You can look at what they're using here. If you go to Properties, Source, and you'll see the name of it. Is there an EPSG code? So just make sure you set a projection in AutoCAD and pick the one you're using with the wake data probably. Then you should just be able to use add data to add the AutoCAD file. So a couple things about adding map elements like your scale bar, your legend, and so forth, which is important and totally scaled.
Before you do that, did you, when you double clicked on that, I might have just been doing something else, but did you go through how to zoom in? So when you double clicked and you're reorienting the artwork or the map artwork within the frame, did you go through that?
No, I didn't.
Do you mind just showing that? Yeah, so I mean, because I just had problems doing that. And then the zooming.
So the important thing to remember is the difference between when you go into the layout view, there's this toolbar that I'm moving around, the layout view tools, and there's the regular ones over here on the left that you would be using in data view. So if I use the pan tool on the layout view, that's for the paper space, and the zoom buttons there are for the paper space. Now the mouse wheel is also in paper space, so if I want to zoom in the data space, you can still use the regular zoom button over here easily.
I think the thing up at the top will also do that, the scale.
Yeah, the scale bar will also change the scale. It's sometimes a very good way to do it because you're staying in a nice map scale.
And we wanted to have that standard, right, Sarah? The scale that's going to be
Yeah, that's what I was
standard
going to start working on right now.
And then pan, if you pick this pan, you'll be panning in the data, regardless of.
And if everybody wanted to get the Capitol building at the exact center, you know how to do that?
I suppose if you zoom to the Capitol building, if you select the building, which is the Capitol building?
That one right there, right? Yeah, that one.
So let's say I select it and I go zoom to, which would probably be easiest by right clicking. Selection, zoom to selected features. So now it's centered, and now if I put in my map scale, let's say 1 to 5,000, it'll be in the dead middle. If you want to save the view, you can go to View. Bookmark, sorry. Create a bookmark. And that will bookmark this view of the map. So if you pan a little bit and you lose your capital in the center, you can go straight back.
So would you recommend then, Sarah, for us, even if you're not mapping the capital in your final map, still having that as a layer within in this so that you can orient the capital to the center in your Raleigh map. So if you're doing like, you know, rivers or hydrology or whatever, you don't necessarily want the capital to be in the final map, still have it as a layer so that you know that the orientation is the same, is identical.
That sounds like an excellent idea. You can, so when in the table of contents over here, if you click on this part at the top that says layers, which holds all these layers here, you can go to properties there, and it will let you control things like the data frame. You can set to a fixed scale or a fixed extent, which you may want. Oh, I also didn't talk about clipping things, although I don't suppose you actually
I don't know if we need to at this.
The bookmark
Yeah.
that we were doing, whenever you set a bookmark, does that set all layers you have on and everything as well? So whenever you click on that, it will automatically go back to those combination of layers?
No, no, that's a nice idea though. But no, just the view, like the scale and the extent.
Okay.
Why would it not be selecting the building?
Why would? What was that?
Would not be selecting the building? Like you just selected the Capitol building?
Are you in it?
Yeah. Double click in the box, right?
The wrong pointer.
Oh, use this one right here. Select features. That allows you to select a specific.
Okay, thank you.
And clear features is next to it. So if you right click on the layers, you can go set the data frame, for example. I wonder if there's, you can also do some things that may be useful for map making, like, although it would be better to be done in Illustrator, you can create a border around the edge of your map, drop shadow around the edge of the map, things like that. I guess I could do it just for an example. It's already got a border set, so I'll set a fatter one, just so you see. And I'll set a gray drop shadow. You can see the shadow, drop shadow on this side. Set background colors if you want, that sort of thing. You can draw reference grids if you want. I'll just go through this really quickly. I don't know if I made it big enough to actually show. Yeah, so you can add a reference grid like you can see it now here, which can help
With orientation.
with orientation and measuring things.
Yeah.
If you save the ArcMap file and I go to open it on another computer, does it link the files and will the links be broken when I go to open it on that computer?
Yes, you'll have to bring the data and put it in essentially the same relative path.
Okay, and I can't like export a package file of the ArcMap?
The package file,
That would like link everything together.
the package file I think just has all the representations packed, but not the data. So what you should do with the data is at least put it in a folder that you carry with the map. So I suggest you put everything in a single folder and move that around computer to computer.
Yeah.
So on that point, if you want to save the representation here, which you certainly do, you should go to File, Save As. That will save ArcMap document MXD format.
And what type of format?
MXD is the map, the ArcMap document. And so when you move that around, you'll want to take your data with it.
We shop it.
You see right there, default GDB, that's a geodatabase. That's, let's say, a database or a container for putting the data in. Which I think you should, but it's too complicated to get into right. We don't have any time left, so we'll leave that off. But I do want to say a few more things before we finish.
What do you do when all your toolbars go away at the top? I've been trying to find them for a while.
Shut down and start again?
I've tried that. It doesn't work.
I know,
I
well,
finally got my table of contents back.
do you still have customize?
Yes, I still have customized.
So you
Toolbars,
can-
okay, I found
You
it.
can turn on certain toolbars you need, and so forth.
What happened? You know how your thing goes there? I'm not gonna say probably you were up there. It's not aligned. Okay.
So if you go to, let's add some map elements, a scale bar, north arrow, that sort of thing. So I'll go to Insert. Let's start with the north arrow. Nice and simple. They've got a library of them. Some of them are a little kitschy, and some are plenty simple.
Did you go to objects or you went to insert?
I went to Insert,
Yeah.
and we'll start with north arrow.
Oh, because I'm in. Are you still in? You know what else?
Get out of your switch.
Oh, I'm doing. Oh, right. Okay. So, legend? Is that what you want?
North arrow first.
Oh, no, okay.
Although there's not much to say.
Pick a north arrow.
Pick a north arrow. Very subjective judgment, of course. I'll stick one, let's say down here. You can scale it with the control points on it, obviously. I don't know if shift actually constrains things in ArcMap. I don't think it does.
So you just have to be careful.
Yeah. Oh, so this is constrained automatically, but for example, when you're dragging the data frame or when you're drawing something, I don't think there's anything like shift constraining, which is unfortunate. It's very hard to draw a square. The founder of ESRI, Environmental Research Systems Research Institute, who make ArcGIS, was a landscape architect, but it doesn't always show in the software design, or maybe
Bad reflection on him.
maybe it reflects badly on us.
It looks like once you get that too, if you go into properties, you can actually change the symbol and change the
Yeah,
color.
you definitely can. You can change a lot of the properties of this,
Size.
but it's probably harder to do than in Illustrator, so I'm
Yeah.
going to skip that for now. When we'll do the scale bar next, so there's the insert scale bar. You may want to change some of the properties of this here though, because they affect the numbers on it. So scale bar is really important because it will help you measure the map. So you could pick a very simple one, or the alternating scale bar, like these can be quite nice, or let's say the step ones, because they show you nicely the breakdown of the smaller units. So all sorts of ones to pick from. Let's say I'll pick this one. You can go to Properties and change the number of divisions and subdivisions. And you can pick the divisional unit. So let's say we pick feet. 4 subdivisions might be a lot unless we're making a long scale, but I'll leave it for now. That's all fine for now. Of course, the font.
So we probably want to standardize those too, or just.
I think we want to do that for Illustrator. In Illustrator for our skills.
Yeah, but I just mean like the, how many divisions, miles versus whatever.
Mhm.
We want everybody to have the same.
Yeah, that's why I just
Two
did
divisions or 4 divisions.
Because they're all working with the same scale, so I would just do 4 for Illustrator.
Oh, okay.
And copy and paste it.
Now you'll have to check how well text exports to Illustrator and whether,
I don't think it's edible anymore.
yeah, whether it's
Just
editable.
into- okay.
So either you may want to export it just with the defaults, and while it's there, rewrite it in Illustrator and delete what was there, or change the typography before. The other thing would be to change typography to what you want it to be here. But
I don't
then
think we'll do
it
that
won't really
because
be nice.
Yeah, they won't be using, they're not going to be using default typefaces, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we'll do
So yeah, if you put this on top of the map, especially since you're going to Illustrator, you could have some problems. So one thing you can do, for example, is put it in white space. You can also, it has a transparent background right now by default. You can also put a white background behind these map elements so that they'll show up over things, but that looks pretty ugly usually. Sometimes people draw a box on the map to hold these elements. There's all sorts of things you can do, but you'll probably be worrying with it later in Illustrator anyways, so I maybe put it in white space to try and preserve the line work and not get it distorted with other things. If you go to insert again, we should probably do a legend, perhaps for the buildings. So if I go to insert legend, I have two columns. One is map layers, the other is legend items. Legend items are things from the map layers that will generate a legend for. So it helps to think of starting with legends items empty. All the map layers are what you have available. So I'll pick buildings and I'll use this arrow to add it over there. So I'll use just buildings for a legend. There's some important things like number of columns, but you may need to come back and change these things after you put them out the first time. If you hit next, there are several context menus of things, several menus of things like the fonts to worry with. And so there's my legend.
So that's all, I mean, I think that's all good to put in, to set up before you export, just because it's good, you're gonna remember. It's like a reference or a legend for you, even though you might end up recreating it in Illustrator. It's good to have it all in here so that you know what's what.
You may want to consider, in this case, you may want to consider adding,
Yeah, it can't be in the 34.
adding some extra paper space.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Or you could export this map with the laid out data at once, and then make another map that's really just for saving that
Oh,
stuff.
that's a good idea, yeah. So you have one that's just a reference map and
Uh-huh.
one that's your actual. Okay.
Oh, I didn't notice, but the grid does have markings on the units.
Is there a way when you're in layout and you're you may have answered this question before, but, and you're adjusting the frame? So for our 29 by 34, we would want the map to just be 29 by 34. So is there a way to kind of set the orientation like to 0, 0, and you know what I'm saying? And then make the frame size 29 by 34. Oh, it's locked. Okay, so I think mine was not, it wasn't snapping.
So you need to put the guides to snap.
Okay, so it snaps to guides. Okay.
And so you can pull the guide on the ruler to the far edge, and then you'll be sure you're snapping to the edge.
Okay, so
otherwise, it's very hard to do. Or, yeah.
So we show the rulers. Okay, I see. Gotcha. Thank you.
You could probably also set no margins when you do page setup, although it may not be very easy to find.
Also, is there like some sort of like zoom extents?
Yeah. So there's one in both the paper space up there and one for the data itself. So this one, next to the pan paper space, is the zoom whole page. Over there in for the data space, you have full extent with the world picture, which will, because I have the ortho imagery layer on, it's going to zoom to the extent of the contiguous US, I think.
I was going to ask how you turn that off, because I accidentally hit the world button like 10 minutes ago, and I haven't been able to see the map.
Oh, what did you?
The map.
I just that little world button, like you just did,
refresh?
and I can't see.
This guy?
Yeah.
Oh, so you're just zoomed out, and you just need to zoom. So if you say right-click on Raleigh Roads and go to Zoom to Layer, you should zoom to it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
How do you zoom to a selection again? Like if you have one thing selected?
Oh, so you would. So I'll turn on the buildings, and I'll pick the zoom. I'm back in data space by now, by the way. Zoom to, let's say this one right here. I'll pick a select feature, click on it, and then right click from my context menu and go zoom features. And then you can just go to your map scale.
So that's not on my options.
It might be because you're in the layers still.
Yeah, but I'm trying to center this map on that, like we did before. No, I'm in here, but I'm trying to center this on here, on the capital. I need to be within it. But it's not, I need to be within that. I need to double click within that and do it.
It's didn't zoom to the middle anyways. Oh, that's because the.
How is it when we do it and it's not what I do?
Good question.
It's only when you're out of it. Yeah, it's only when
You're out of it. Yeah.
How did you do it a second ago?
I went out of it.
But whenever we were in this frame, you went in and you zoomed in, and then you went back and entered the old scale, and it zoomed out and centered it on that.
Yeah, I was
Capital
looking
building.
this up.
What's that?
Remember when you got that in the recenter?
Right.
You zoomed completely in. You went over here and made it like pulled down a zoom too, but I don't.
That's what they're trying to figure out right now. So I think what
Let's see.
It's the arrow with the little box behind it.
Oh, is it in there?
I just don't know
Is it
where you
underneath
are.
there? Zoom too?
Where is downtown here?
I don't know yet from where you are.
I mean,
I think it's down.
Oh, I think
below you. I
you
think you're
did that one.
north.
college.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so we can see it there. So I'll get select feature. Oh, it's already selected in it. And then
Maybe go back and maybe get out of this view and go back to just your map view.
Yeah, there it is.
center. That's nice.
And then zoom out. Well, I don't know.
That's not.
That's all.
That's it's only centered vertically.
So right there,
Uh,
yeah, right there is where it is center.
Zoom to selected features.
Okay, so
Oh wait, no, right here.
Yeah.
Sorry, see
And
that?
then,
Like the
oh, right
cross-
here. No.
the cross-
That.
Then we can go
Yeah,
to the
right
map
here.
scale
That's
and
capital
go to
letter.
some.
Okay, zoom in.
So we're no longer in the paper space.
I went back to
So,
data
Going
space.
back to this.
No, when we switched to paper space, it should be the same.
Okay, so you have to do the centering in the data space.
I don't
Right
think
there.
so, but if you're having problems in paper space, then that's what I would.
I think you do have to, because she wasn't, I think that's what she did. I think you went back into the non-layout mode and oriented it there.
Sometimes you do things without thinking about it. So,
So you're saying that you're centering capital while you're in the paper mode, not the layout.
you do it in the data mode.
It's in the
not,
data mode
not
now,
the
once it's
layout.
chosen. I have the capital selected. Remind me one more time, I just missed that last. Okay, so there it's selected.
It's selected now. Right click on it.
Now right click. Okay.
It should be, it should say selected features.
Zoom to selected features.
Okay.
Try that.
There you go. Now you can just change the map scale.
To,
See when
Oh,
it's
right,
down.
that's the whole element.
so.
Did you do it, try
Yes.
doing it in the other mode? That's
All right.
That helped.
And now it should be centered, correct?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so now I can go back into the
What's
mode.
wrong?
I just did something, but I didn't even.
No, no, these.
Is it this one?
No,
Oh,
it's not.
that is
It is, but I just have my paper set up correctly.
I think this is what
So we just
is
zoom
there.
next in. We're zooming
I
in.
see.
Click on that.
Now, it only center feature is.
She raised it, okay.
It's frame.
Now, if I want this to be centered back into the page, I need to go back here, right?
Oh, no, you need to.
Okay.
And then go back into your layout mode.
I need to
And now it's going huge,
down.
but now you can
can
take
take
your
the
scale.
frame
So
itself.
that is how we do it. That's how we do it.
And then I have to
So
go.
No, no, no.
What is this?
That's all the stuff inside that stays.
Are we
just
doing
moving
it?
it.
That's
So, you might wanna.
She's going, she's going to tell us what the scale is.
Like
I
so.
think the one to, oh, that's one of the ones that that's weird. The other thing that you want to make